Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about the Dark Eldar Talos and how it is one of the best units in the Dark Eldar army. And I would actually argue that it's probably the best unit in the Dark Eldar Codex in close combat for a number of reasons. But before we go into that, I do want to address the fact that the Dark Eldar are looking a little bit better post-data slate than they were before. And I know they're still kind of at the bottom rung of competitive play. Last time we checked in on them, they were at the very bottom in last place in competitive play, of course. But there have been some players that have had success with them, and most of the competitive lists that you've seen feature at least one unit of Talos. And that is because the Talos fills a role in the Dark Eldar army that they desperately need, that is missing from most Dark Eldar forces. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to go ahead and analyze that role, talk about it a little bit, and dive deep into why the Talos is one of the better units in the index. So without further ado, let us go ahead and dive right into it. But first, a quick overview of today's video. We're going to be looking at the Talos' stats, weapons, and special rules, their strengths and weaknesses, their combos and synergies. We're going to be asking the question, why the Talos is a quintessential unit in a Dark Eldar army, and lastly, the role Talos play in a Dark Eldar army and how to make the most out of them. So as far as the stats of the Talos go, on paper, just by itself, it doesn't really look that impressive. It has a pretty slow movement at 7. Once you realize it has the fly and monster keywords, it becomes a little bit less optimal as far as its movement as well. It does have a 3+ save and a 6+ invul. The invul rarely comes into play, but does come in sometimes against melta weapons and stuff like that. And it does have toughness 7 with 7 wounds, which is respectable. Toughness 7 will allow it to survive better against a lot of small arms fire, and the 3+ armor save, being able to benefit from cover and stuff like that, is quite durable. As far as its melee weapons go, it has 4 melee weapon options, basically to, suit whatever kind of target you want to go after. It has chain flails, which are good against light infantry. The macro scalpel is effective against mech type targets. The Talos gauntlet is good against Terminator equivalents and also light vehicles below toughness 8. And lastly, the Ichor injector gives you 1 extra attack, which is pretty much garbage. And there's really no reason to take this. I know it's an extra attack, but it really doesn't do a lot in the whole scheme of things. And you're much better off always going with a twin liquefier gun over, just 1 extra attack in close combat. As far as its ranged weapons go, it can take a Stinger Pod, which is basically good against light infantry. It can also take the Haywire Blaster, which is really good against vehicles and has twin linked, so it can reroll wounds, making it extremely reliable at dealing mortal wounds to vehicle targets. And lastly, it can take a Heat Lance, which, while good, only has 1 attack, and of course the Talos has Ballistic Skill 4. Replacing one of its melee weapons, you can take the Twin Liquefier Gun, which is really good. You always want to take this thing because it makes up for the Talos' poor ballistic skill and is a good deterrent for, closer range units. And lastly, you could also, if you wanted to, take a Twin Splinter Cannon instead of the Haywire Blaster on the Stinger of the Talos. But, it's really not the greatest weapon to take on the Talos just because you have so much access to Splinter Cannons via the Cabalites and things like that, so you don't really need it on the Talos as well. It is a decent weapon, but, overall, not that great on this particular model. As for its abilities, it has a 5+ Feel No Pain, which make it really tough. It is a bit less tough for the cost than the Chronos, but it's still very durable with a 3+ save and a 5+ Feel No Pain. It also becomes permanently empowered when it kills a unit, which allows it to reroll all advance rolls, charge rolls, and hit rolls. And that's permanently for the rest of the game, so it becomes really pain token independent once it kills an enemy unit. As far as its war gear options, it can take up to 3 weapons, so 2 fist weapons, which are mainly for melee except for the liquefier gun, which can replace one of the melee weapons. You pretty much always want to do this because you can't attack with both of them in the same turn. You have to pick which one you want to attack with, so you might as well just make one of them a ranged weapon. And the other weapon it can take on the Stinger of the model, and that's basically either Haywire Blasters, a Heat Lance, a Stinger Pod, or a Twin Splinter Cannon, which, again, most of those options aren't the greatest. The best option by far, in my opinion, is the Haywire Blasters for those, twin-linked devastating wound combinations against tougher vehicles. As for the unit composition, you can take between 1 and 2 Talos in a unit, and each one of them costs 90 points, which is a little bit more expensive than the Chronos, obviously at 50 points apiece, so you're getting less durability for the point cost, but you're also getting a bunch of extra damage. You're getting 2 extra ranged weapons because, you're always going to take the liquefier gun basically, and I'll go into why in just a second, but you're also getting the twin Haywire Blaster on top of a much better melee profile. So you're getting a lot more for your points for this thing. It is, again, less durable for the cost, but you're getting a lot more damage out of it. As far as its keywords go, it does have the monster and fly keywords, which make it hard to move through ruins. I think this is probably one of the worst things about the Talos, just because of the fact that it makes it kind of slow and kind of, unmaneuverable in certain positions. Okay, so what are the Talos' strengths and weaknesses? So its strengths are it has great durability with a 3+ save and a 5+ feel no pain. There's no weapon pretty much in the game that can guarantee a kill against this thing in one shot, unless, you're talking about, Titan level weapons and things like that. So your average anti-large weapon, your multi-melta, your last cannon, your bright lance aren't going to be able to take down one of these things in one shot, which is extremely important for trading and things like that. Its damage is also very respectable. It has a great ranged weapon, and it also has very good combat ability. And once permanently empowered, it is very resource independent, so it doesn't have to worry about needing pain tokens every time it wants to do something. And being able to reroll advance and charge rolls to make it more reliable when it's moving across the battlefield is very important for a slow-moving monster to have. It also has really good shooting, Its twin Haywire Blaster is very powerful, and so is its twin liquefier gun. As far as its weaknesses go, it is very slow, and it's a monster with fly, so it's one of those models you really do have to make sure the positioning is correct on, because if it's not going to be getting where it needs to be quickly. As far as its combos and synergies go, it really doesn't have a whole lot of, obvious synergies with things, except for Yuri and Rakarth, which can heal them. But if you dig a little bit deeper, it does have good synergy with the other units that you want to take in your army. The Scourges and the Kabalites are good at softening units up so that the Talos can deal the killing blow and empower themselves permanently. And the Math Hammer tends to work out pretty good for this because a unit of 2 Talos on average will do about 6 to 9 mortal wounds to a vehicle. And if we're talking a heavier vehicle, Scourges typically are not going to be able to one-shot it on their own. You're typically going to need a couple of Scourge squads to take out even one vehicle, but if you have 2 Taloses on the battlefield and within 24 of that vehicle, you can guarantee pretty much that both the Scourges and the Talos together will be able to take it out, give you a pain token for destroying an enemy unit, and at the same time permanently empowering those Talos for the rest of the game. And of course, if it's an infantry unit, if your Kabalites are in a Venom or a Raider or something like that, you can hose down an enemy infantry unit, get it to about 1 or 2 models, and then 2 Talos with liquefier guns or, even just the Haywire Blasters usually with the rerolls to wound should be able to pick up at least 1 or 2 Space Marines, even if they are wounding on 5+ with their twin-linked Haywire Blasters. So why is the Talos a quintessential unit in a Dark Eldar army? So they're extremely resilient to Overwatch and by far the strongest combat unit in the Index. And I think this is really what makes the Talos super strong in a Dark Eldar list. Because if you really think about it, the only units in a Dark Eldar army that can punch really hard in combat are units that are also extremely fragile. Things like Witches or Incubi with Drazar. Now, even Incubi with a 3+ armor save are not going to stand up to any kind of, serious Overwatch, especially if the enemy unit has taunt weapons or some sort of rerolls or something like that. And even if you get lucky and you only end up losing a couple of Witches, maybe 3 Witches or maybe, 1 or 2 Kabalites, that's still a significant dent in your unit that now is going to feel like an uphill battle trying to chew through enemy armor or the other enemy unit that you just charged. It's really an uphill battle with Dark Eldar players having to deal with Overwatch. Talos, though, they really don't give a damn about Overwatch. They will just charge right through it with their 3+ armor save, toughness 7, and feel no pain. Your opponent would be lucky to get a few wounds on a Talos, let alone take one out. And especially since the changes to Overwatch happened, you really can't guarantee killing something like a Talos with Overwatch. There's no more Wraith Knights overwatching, there's no more Shadow Swords overwatching and things like that. So, basically your Talos is pretty much immune to Overwatch as far as the damage it takes to kill it goes. It might take a few wounds, but it's not going to be nearly enough to kill it. It's also a great area denial tool with solid Overwatch capabilities. So not only is it resilient to Overwatch, but it can also Overwatch itself. Having a twin liquefier gun, and you do have 2 of those in the unit because you're going to have 2 Talos. And that's going to be a lot of damage going into enemy units that they probably don't want to take for free. It's also very resource independent because of the fact that it empowers itself when it destroys an enemy unit. And it fills a niche in both combat and ranged that the rest of the army doesn't do efficiently. Haywire blasters are great against toughness 12 and over vehicles that Dark Lances kind of struggle to deal a lot of damage to. And of course, the Gauntlet in close combat is good against tough 3-wound models, things like Terminators and stuff like that. Maybe not infantry models, because the rest of your army has anti-infantry, but maybe things like tough bikes, stuff like that, your infantry is going to be wounding on 6s, the Talos can go in there and clean house. So what is the role Talos play in a Dark Eldar army, and how do you make the most out of them? So Talos are a fantastic multi-role unit that fill in the main weaknesses of a Dark Eldar army. They're a great buffer and area denial unit as well, having access to strong torrent weapons for Overwatch. They are best used in the midfield to bully enemies off objectives and prevent enemies from jumping on your more fragile units. And they really do a great job at this because not only are they good at dealing Overwatch to certain enemy units, typically faster units in Warhammer 40k are also more fragile. So they're going to be taking more damage to things like liquefier guns. If you're worried about an enemy unit of warp spiders or swooping hawks jumping on your Kabalites or jumping on your other more fragile units like your Scourges in the backfield, having a unit of Talos right next to you is basically a guarantee that that unit of warp spiders or that unit of swooping hawks is going to die a horrible death. And the twin liquefiers aren't bad against other models too, things like intercessors and stuff like that might try to get behind your lines, try to get around you to hit those Scourges. They're very good at protecting those types of units. And because they're so tough, they can actually do a decent job being on objectives. So if your opponent doesn't have enough firepower in a certain area of the battlefield to take them out, 2 Taloses can easily hold that objective for multiple turns, which is another thing Dark Eldar struggle at. Just like the Craft-Rolled Eldar, they are not really great at holding primary objectives, which the Talos do very well for their points cost. So, in conclusion, Talos are an absolutely amazing unit that have the rare ability of being able to be used offensively as well as defensively in equal measure, which is a rare thing to have in the game, especially for Eldar armies. Usually an Eldar or Dark Eldar unit isn't good at everything, but the Talos is very effective at both shooting and, of course, defensively being able to hold objectives or deny areas of the board to your opponent. Their weapon loadouts also cover the damage gaps in a typical Dark Eldar list, as Haywire is able to deal with toughness 12 or greater vehicles, and the Talos Gauntlet is great against tough non-infantry units that poison can't handle. So again, like I said before, splinter rifles are great, but they're not really effective against bikes or mounted units or cavalry or monsters, etc., right? The Talos Gauntlet, however, is something that can deal with those other types of enemies fairly effectively. And having used multiple Talos in quite a few games now, I can honestly say that it's one of the best units in the index by far. It has really impressive shooting that you wouldn't think, just because of the fact that, again, once it's empowered, you're rerolling all of your hits. Their twin liquefier gun really puts a lot of pressure on enemy fast units that are going for secondary objectives and stuff like that, and you can deny your opponent a lot of objective points if you know where to place the Talos, especially if you take multiple units. And just imagine, what are the most common secondary objectives that people usually go for in the early game? Things like deploy teleport homers, engage, stuff like that, right? So what do those objectives have you do? Well, they have you move units to certain positions of the board. If you know where your opponents are going to move those units, and they're usually going to be cheap units, they're not going to be super expensive ones, right? Cheap and fast means they're fairly squishy. We're talking things like scouts or like warp spiders or, those kind of lighter, faster units that are meant to jump around the board and score on secondaries. Well, if you know where to place your Taloses, your opponent's going to have a really hard time scoring those secondaries, especially in the early game, and this could swing battles in your favor very quickly. And the other good thing about this is that Talos are not easy to kill. They're not easy to kill with indirect fire. Usually indirect fire weapons have a hard time dealing with them because not only are they at -1 to hit, but they're giving the Talos a cover save on top of their already great durability. And if your opponent tries to aim any anti-large weaponry at them, they're going to have to expose some of their, more powerful units to the rest of your army. And you have things like Scourges and Ravagers and stuff like that. They can just pop out and nail those units downrange very easily. So they really do open up a lot of opportunities for the rest of the units in your army to also perform better as well. So yeah, Talos, there's just so many good things to say about them. They really do a lot for your army in a lot of different ways. And if you compare them to the craft world equivalent, which would be the Wraithlord, right? They're just objectively better than the Wraithlord. And this is coming from somebody who really does like Wraithlords. I think Wraithlords are a great denial unit. I think they are really good at providing that overwatch, because they have the flamers as well. It's just the Talos do everything the Wraithlord can do, but better. So when you stick that in an army that, really does rely on having durable units to survive Overwatch, that really does need you to deny areas of the board because they have squishy backline units like Scourges. And also at the same time needs a unit that is efficient and that can use resources like pain tokens more efficiently, you have a recipe for a unit that is going to be quintessential to any Dark Eldar list that wants to perform well competitively. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Talos. Let me know what you guys think in the comments though, especially you more seasoned Dark Eldar players. I am a decent Dark Eldar player. I've played them on and off for years, but I wouldn't consider them my main army. So, I'm very open to any tips or advice or anything like that. Or if you want to add something about Talos that maybe I missed in this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. I would really appreciate it. I'm going to be continuing to bring Dark Eldar content to you guys as well as continue my normal Craftworld Eldar content, so definitely stay tuned for that. And thank you so much to my patrons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last year. Your help has greatly improved the channel and helped it grow significantly. If you do want to help support the channel and become a Patreon member, I have free trials activated. A free trial will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who like talking about strategy, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description. I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page, so if you want to grab some discounted Eldar miniatures on Amazon, or you want to rep some, Craftworld or Dark Eldar inspired apparel at your local game store, I will leave those links in the description as well. Lastly, I am waiting on the pending approval of Kickstarter to approve my Eldar Knights Fandex project that, I kind of started about a month or so back. And unfortunately, the first Kickstarter failed, but I'm hoping this second Kickstarter, with a lower goal in mind, will be able to succeed and will be funded so that we can have art for the index I am creating. And this time around, I think we will meet our goal because obviously, most of the work on the actual rules is already done and it's, going to be undergoing some beta testing within the next couple weeks. So that should be good. And then really all we're waiting for is, the Kickstarter to be successful so that I can provide artwork for the index. And hopefully, if I can find someone willing to do it, some suggested STL files for all of the units that, are going to be in the index as well. If you do have any, feedback on that or want to, reach out to me and talk to me about the Eldar Knights Fandex, maybe you have some ideas or maybe you want to give me some feedback on things you've tested, etc., go ahead and shoot me an email at proxy.hammer1@gmail.com. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody. See you later.